All right, so thank you everyone for joining us as we go through the dental school application overview, as well as demo the AADSAS application system. The first thing that I want to point out is that many of you may have some concerns about how the COVID-19 pandemic may impact your 2021 application cycle. So there's a link here that you can use to find information about the COVID-19 pandemic and how it relates to components of your application. Under dental, you'll find information from AADSAS, the American Dental Education Association, in regards to updates, the DAT, AADSAS, which is the application system, as well as TMDSAS, the Texas application system. So this is a great place to bookmark and keep up to date on relevant information. As of today, April 7th, we have not received any notifications that application cycles have been changed due to COVID-19. However, as the pandemic progresses and we get closer to the actual opening of the application systems, that may change. So it's important to stay up to date on that information as you can. All right, so let's move into talking about the timeline for applying. As you can see, the application timeline really spans an entire year. So students should begin preparing for the DAT in the spring semester before they're starting to apply. Hopefully those of you who are applying in this cycle have started to prepare for your DAT already. In addition to preparing for your DAT, you're going to want to make sure that you have registered to actually take your DAT. And so that process can be found on the DAT website. It includes providing information regarding your preparation for dental school and the schools that you choose to apply to before you are approved to actually schedule your exam. In addition to preparing for and registering for your DAT, there are components of your application that you can begin to work on early. So one common part of the application that students should be working on before the application actually opens is your personal statement. Your personal statement is a 4,500 character essay addressing the prompt, why do you want to pursue a dental education? And so that essay is something that you will want to write, revise, seek feedback, revise again before it's ready for submission. We encourage students to have their personal statement ideally completed by the time that the spring semester is over. That way, it's done before your application opens. Students who wait to have the personal statement completed until the application has already opened often find that the personal statement writing process takes longer than they anticipated, and they will have all of the components of the application ready, but not the personal statement, and that ends up delaying their application. In addition to the components of your application that you can begin working on now is an excellent time to start researching schools and considering where you will be applying. The national average for applicants is 9 schools. And so based on certain conditions, you might decide to apply to more or fewer. However, it's important to have a good list of schools before the application opens so that you've already done your research. One tool that you can use is the AADSAS Dental School Explorer. This tool allows you to find information on all 76 dental schools in one place. I'll briefly show you how the tool works by going through the IU website section. So the first thing that you'll find in the contact information is the link to the admissions page for the School of Dentistry. This is important, especially in the COVID-19 pandemic, as individual schools may have made changes to their policies, particularly regarding pass-fail credit, SF credit, online prerequisites, or online labs. That information may not necessarily be reflected within the Dental School Explorer. The general information section provides information on the school itself, as well as their mission, vision, and core values. This can give you an idea of what's important to a particular school, and ideally for schools that you want to apply to, this aligns with your own personal values. The next section provides information on the school itself, including whether it's a public or private school, the start time, and how many students they will accept in their entering class. The curriculum section provides information on the curriculum as well as combined degree programs that may be offered. Preparation provides information on bachelor's degree requirements, credit hours, as well as prerequisite coursework. I strongly encourage everyone to double check the prerequisite coursework listed in the Dental School Explorer against the institution's website, because varying courses may not align specifically with the course categories included in the Dental School Explorer. There's also information on whether community college and/or advanced placement or AP credit are accepted, requirements for dental shadowing or other admissions factors, the DAT, and a timetable for when you should be taking the DAT. The application and selection section provides information on deadlines, as well as when the earliest date for acceptance offers will be made. It also provides information on deposits, including dollar amounts and the number of deposits required for an applicant to maintain their admissions seat within an entering class. The application process section will provide information on the application process, interview, and any residency requirements. And then we move into information about previous applicants who have matriculated into that particular school. So in this case, IU provides information on the 2018 applicant and entering class. So the students who applied and matriculated in the fall of 2018. You can find a variety of demographic descriptions, residency information, average and range of DAT and GPA scores. The next section provides information on cost for a recent as well as previous school year. So you can see how tuition and our other costs may have increased and potentially anticipate any additional increases to tuition for your entering year. There's also a section on student life, which provides information about the environment within the school, which may help you determine whether that is an appropriate educational environment for you. The last two sections around international dental graduates and pre-dental programs likely does not apply to most individuals who will be applying through the AADSAS application. So as you can see, the Dental School Explorer is a nice tool to be able to use. You can also create notes and compare schools within a particular, within the tool itself. So let's go back to the timeline. As we move into the summer, you'll want to take your DAT. So in an ideal timeline, we suggest that students take the DAT between the middle of May and the middle of June. Part of the reason for this is that your DAT score will take approximately 7 weeks to be officially released to schools and attached to your application. So completing the DAT early in the summer allows for that to be completed likely by the time you plan to submit your primary application. In addition, for individuals who perhaps received a score on the DAT that they feel is not reflective of their abilities and would choose to retake the exam, there is some time left later in the summer into the fall semester for students to be able to retake the DAT after significant continued preparation. Following taking the DAT, you'll want to submit the primary application, which is the AADSAS application. We're going to demo that application later, and in just a moment, we'll discuss the specific timeline for the primary application. Typically, following the primary application, you will receive a secondary application from many schools. Secondary applications, which we'll describe in more detail later, come specifically from the school and ask more in-depth questions about your interest in a particular school and/or in categories that they may find interesting or relevant to their admissions review process. It's important to note that secondary applications can begin to be received as soon as your application has been verified and submitted to schools. This is another reason why we encourage students to submit their application early. As we discuss the secondary process, you'll understand why this can be very time consuming, and hopefully you're receiving most of your secondaries with enough time to be able to complete them and return them prior to starting your fall semester classes. Depending on your timeline, you may continue to receive secondary applications into the fall semester. This is also where schools will begin inviting students for interviews and conducting interviews. No schools will provide decisions before December 1st. However, interviews and decision notifications may continue to be made following December 1st and into the spring semester. As we think about the opening of the cycle, we should talk about how each application system opens on a slightly different timeline. So for individuals who are choosing to apply to public Texas dental schools, you will apply using the TMD-SAS application. That application system opens on May 1st and is a flat fee regardless of how many schools you choose to apply to. We recommend that students apply extremely early in the TMD-SAS cycle, as the majority of students who are accepted to Texas public schools are residents of the state of Texas. The majority of you will be applying through AADSAS, which is the AADSAS centralized application system for all schools outside of Texas. The application timeline here is a little bit different. So the AADSAS application will open on May 12th, and it's what we call a soft open. At this time, you'll be able to enter the application, begin completing various components, but you will not be eligible to submit your application until June 2nd when it is fully open. As you might imagine, this indicates that we do not expect you to complete your application and submit it all in one day. The application has a number of different sections and requires a significant amount of time and attention. We encourage you to think about completing this application over multiple days with the intention to submit shortly after June 2nd, but no later than July 4th. Most dental schools run on a rolling admissions, which means as applications are being received, they are reviewed, students are invited for interviews, and decisions are being made. It's important to know that even though schools may have deadlines in October and or later in the application cycle, they are reviewing and making decisions well before that application deadline occurs. The earlier you submit your application, the better. In addition, we'll talk about the verification process later, but the verification process goes much more quickly for students who apply early in the cycle. So I've already mentioned the primary and secondary applications, but here's a little bit of information on how these two processes differ. So the primary application is that centralized application service that you are going to use to submit information to every school that you choose to apply to. This application is mostly data entry and is used to confirm the requirements for each school. Things such as prerequisite courses, DAT scores, GPA calculations, observation hours, and other components that the admissions committees find valuable. In its essence, the primary application is generic to the school. There is no component of your primary application that is school specific or where you will mention a particular school. The secondary application will come typically later. Many schools will send secondary applications to every student for whom they receive a verified application. However, some schools may choose to have an internal threshold, for example, a minimum GPA or DAT score, that they use to reduce the number of secondary applications that they send out. These secondary applications are essay-based and are specific to the individual school. This is an opportunity for you to show your personality and express your interest in a particular school. Secondary applications can have anywhere usually between 3 to sometimes as many as 10 essay prompts. It's important to know that when you start to begin to receive secondary applications, you may receive many within the same time frame. We encourage students to complete and return secondary applications within 14 days. This allows your application to move forward in the review process quickly and efficiently. Therefore, it's important to note that while you may receive multiple secondary applications within a few days, and your goal is to turn them around relatively quickly, you might want to focus on submitting your application early so that ideally you're receiving and completing these secondary applications prior to the beginning of that fall semester. Otherwise, you're going to spend the first couple of weeks of your fall semester while you're acclimating to your classes, also trying to complete these essays. So there are a couple of things that are important to know as we move forward in talking about the application itself. The first is the application system instructions. Now, I know that application manuals are not the most riveting piece of reading, but it is important to be familiar with what the application is asking for and the intricacies of that information prior to starting your application. In addition, you should hang on to your application system instructions so that you have them as a reference as you're completing your application. You should be able to find the application system instructions for AADSAS as well as TMDSAS on each application's respective home page. Next, let's talk about transcripts. So for every institution that you have received or attempted college credit, you will be required to submit a transcript as a part of your application. So this includes courses where you may have completed dual credit in high school, regardless of whether that credit was transferred to IUPUI or is being used towards your degree. In addition, if you have coursework from another institution that you transferred from to IUPUI, or whether you didn't transfer that credit at all, maybe it's from a specialized institution like a nursing school. And for some students, you might have graduate credit. All of this information needs to be submitted as a part of your application. We'll talk in a little bit more detail when we get into the application about ordering transcripts, but it is important to note that this ordering process can take about 2 weeks. So most institutions, including IU, have an online transcript request form. Once you've completed the transcript request form, then the institution's registrar office must receive and process that request, process, compile, print, and package your transcripts for mail. Mail your transcripts to AADSAS, and AADSAS must receive, unpackage, process, and attach your transcripts to your application. So again, in total, this can take about 2 weeks. Ideally, your transcripts should be received by AADSAS prior to the date that you are planning to submit your application. And the reason for that is this. If you submit your application and your transcripts have already been received, then your application will be marked as complete, ready for review. If your application is submitted and you are missing one or more of your transcripts, your application will be put on hold until those transcripts have been received. Once your transcripts have been received and your application has been marked complete, ready for review, it will then move into the queue for verification. It can sit in the queue for as many as a couple of days to a couple of weeks, depending upon the volume of applications being processed at that time. Once your application moves to the top of the queue, it will then be selected by a staff member for verification. During this process, an AADSAS staff member will review the PDF of your transcript with all of the information that you have submitted as a part of your application regarding the coursework you have taken. And they will go line by line to ensure that that information is accurate. If you have made a mistake or there is any error, your application can be returned to you with a note for how to address the error. Upon resubmission, your application then goes back into the queue for verification. Now, some people might ask, why does your application include information on your coursework if you're submitting a copy of your transcripts to AADSAS? And the reason for this is that the information that you provide within the content of your application is utilized to calculate your application GPAs, including a cumulative GPA, science GPA, and year-by-year GPAs. This can only be done with the information when it is digitally entered into the application and cannot be pulled directly from a PDF. However, AADSAS is responsible for ensuring the information that you submit into the application is accurate and matches the information on your transcripts, hence the verification process. We'll talk a little bit more about course entry and the verification process when we get to that section of the application. Here are some common application components. So the first section in your application is going to be biographic information, followed by information about your academic history and coursework. There will be a section in your application to submit information about entrance exam scores, including the DAT, as well as other scores you might be required to submit, such as the TOEFL or GRE. There's a section within your application where you will address experiences, those things you've participated in outside of the classroom that helped prepare you to become a dental student. You will also have a section of letters of evaluation, sometimes called letters of recommendation, where you will submit information for those individuals who have agreed previously to write letters of recommendation on your behalf. You will also have the personal statement, which we discussed earlier, as well as a section on school designations where you choose the schools that you would like to apply to, and fees. Fees are calculated based on the number of schools to which you apply. There is a flat fee for use of the AADSAS application, which includes an application to one school. Every school above that you choose to apply to will incur an additional fee. The flat fee is approximately $250, and additional fees can be as much as $50 to $100 per school. It's important to note, though, that in addition to these fees, many schools that have secondary applications also have a secondary fee. These fees can be anywhere from $50 to $100 per school. If you're concerned about the cost of applying to dental school, you should consider looking into the Fee Assistance Program. This program provides a discounted rate towards your application. It is used for individuals who have certain financial restrictions, and there is an application process. Most worthy of note is that many schools will discount or greatly or waive the secondary application fees for students who have a fee application waiver. For more information on the fee assistance application, you can find that by Googling AADSAS fee assistance or dental school fee assistance. Okay, so let's talk about your pre-application checklist. We've talked at length about researching schools and that the national average for applicants is 9 schools per student. At this point, you should have a list of schools that are probably several more than the number of schools that you're planning to apply to. Once you've received your DAT score and have an understanding of where your GPA may be at the end of the spring semester, you might choose to reduce the number of schools to which you apply based on those factors. I also encourage students to explore the application service, which is what we're about to do next. Please note that even though you can access the AADSAS application currently, your application cycle does not open until May 12th. So information that you are completing potentially in the AADSAS application prior to May 12th will not be included in your own application. I also recommend getting an advice from a pre-professional advisor, both on your application as well as things like your personal statement and other components. If you are a School of Science or honors student, you can schedule an appointment with the PreP's office in SSC campus through 1.IU. If you are not a science major, you can schedule an appointment with the Health and Life Sciences Advising Center. Information for scheduling with that office is available on their website, at hls.iupui.edu. In addition, you should start thinking about identifying those individuals that you will ask to be a recommender or write a letter on your behalf. Many schools have preferences regarding the type of individuals who write your letters. This might include, for example, a science faculty member. By science, they mean biology, chemistry, or physics. And by faculty, they mean an individual with whom you have taken a course. Some schools may also request letters of recommendation from non-science faculty members, so anyone you have taken a course with outside of biology, chemistry, or physics, from a research mentor or supervisor, or from a dentist that ideally you have worked with or shadowed significantly. It's important to note that you should always ask your recommenders in advance about writing a letter of recommendation on your behalf. The next thing you'll want to do is compose your essays, which will include your personal statement. You'll also want to begin organizing your supporting documentation, which can include things like the experiences that you plan to include. You will want to have information such as the organization and name of a person who can verify your experience, the dates and number of hours you were involved in the experience, as well as a brief description. Finally, if you think that admissions committees are not scouring the internet, including social media, for information about applicants, you would be wrong. It's important to make sure that your social media accounts are an accurate reflection of who you are as an applicant. I encourage students to think about social media handles that they may have had that have long been forgotten, or may have posts that are not reflective of who you are as an applicant. Now is the time to clean those up, put them on private, or delete them entirely. In addition to preparing for the application itself, you'll want to prepare for the remaining components of the application process, including interviews. Many schools ask students questions about ethical scenarios, and so I strongly encourage students to review the ethical guidelines of the American Dental Association. It's also important to watch and read the news relevant to your field, to be apprised of information that is important. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic is a huge topic in healthcare, and while you may not consider dentists to be on the front lines of this pandemic, it has definitely impacted the dental profession. In addition, you will want to consider some financial planning. So you'll want to create a budget for your application fees, but you'll also want to take into account interview travel, deposits, and other things you might be spending money on as a part of your application. If you are traveling nearby, for example, to the IU School of Dentistry, your travel expenses may be low. But if you have applied to a school that requires more significant transportation, for example, a plane ticket, you will be responsible for providing that transportation and accommodations for your interview. In addition, all schools have a seat deposit that is required once you have been offered admission to maintain that seat within the entering class. I also recommend that students complete the FAFSA for the 2021-2022 academic year early. This usually opens in the fall semester prior to your matriculation. This will allow you to be eligible for any need-based or school-based scholarships that may be available. You'll also want to develop an alternate plan should you not be accepted to dental school in this cycle. This again is an opportunity to meet with a pre-professional advisor either in the PreP's office or in the Health and Life Sciences Advising Center to be able to identify what your alternate plan might be. At this point, we're going to move into the application system. You can locate the AADSAS application by Googling AADSAS or going to the ADEA Go Dental page. When you sign in, you'll see that the application has been broken into 4 quadrants. We're going to go through each quadrant individually and discuss the components therein. In your personal information quadrant, you will find that there are 8 sections that need to be completed. As you complete each section, the circle will start to fill green. The first section is your release and provides a variety of releases that are required in order for you to be able to utilize the application system. One release of particular importance is the advisor release. And this is where you can select to have your application released to the health professions advisor at the institutions that you have attended. It's important to note that as advisors, we do not have any access to your application's details. I cannot see your personal statement, the contents of the letters from your letters of recommendation, or any other sensitive information. What I do have access to is information that can help assist you in the admissions process, such as your DAT scores, GPA calculations within the application statuses, and schools that you have designated. We strongly encourage students to release their application to the health professions advisor on their campus. The next section is your biographic information, which asks information about your name, sex, and birth. The third section is your contact information, where you will provide information about your current and permanent address, phone, and email address. I encourage you to utilize an email address that you check frequently, but perhaps one that is not flooded with emails, because this is the address where all pertinent information, including secondary applications and communications from schools, will occur. You want to make sure that this is an email address where you're not going to inadvertently miss time-sensitive information. The next section is around citizenship, state of residency, visa, and DACA status. The environmental factors section does have some questions that are not required. It's important to note that unless otherwise specified, admissions officials have access to all responses within your application. This section will provide information on your family situation, whether you consider yourself to be a disadvantaged student, childhood residency, and high school information. For the disadvantaged consideration, if you select yes, you will have a pop-up box where you can provide up to 4,500 characters about your background that will help admissions committees understand how your disadvantaged status has impacted you. The next section is a parent and guardian section where you will enter information about your parents and or guardians. As mentioned, this information is only used for data and recruitment processes and therefore is not shared with the admissions committee. The next section is on race and ethnicity. Again, this section is used for statistical purposes only and does not affect your application or financial aid. The final section provides a number of different opportunities for you to share details that are commonly referred to as miscellaneous. The first is your DENT PIN. This is the identification number that you received when you registered for your DAT exam and allows the application to identify your application and your DAT score. Next, you will be asked to provide information about your language proficiency. Every applicant is required to submit information about their native language, as well as any additional languages that you may speak. You can provide information about your military status, and then felonies, misdemeanors, or license infractions. If you select yes, you will have a 500-character box where you can provide an explanation for each offense. It's important to know that just because you have a felony or misdemeanor conviction does not necessarily mean you will not be accepted to medical school, to dental school. Individual schools will review this information and make determinations largely in line with whether the identified offense would prohibit you from being licensed as a dentist. In addition, you will provide information about academic or school student conduct violations. Again, if you select yes for either, you will have a box with 500 characters to be able to provide an explanation. The next section asks if you have previously attended or previously or plan to apply to another health profession or health profession school. The following sections ask about your educational interruption. So, has your education ever been interrupted or adversely affected for reasons other than deficiencies in conduct or academic performance? Or has your education been interrupted because of military service? For either of these, if you select yes, you will have a 1,000-character box to provide an explanation. The next question asks if you have previously applied to dental schools, and if so, to explain what you have done or how you have improved your application since the previous cycle. Finally, there is a 600-character box to address manual dexterity, where you can describe any activities in which you are proficient that require manual dexterity. Activities may include things such as jewelry making, cross-stitching, playing musical instruments, arts and crafts, or other activities that require fine motor skills. So that's the personal information section. Next, we'll move into the academic history. In your academic history section, you'll be required to provide information about the high school from which you graduated. You will not be required to submit information about your high school transcripts. The next section requires you to enter any and all campuses in which you have attended or have pursued college credit. It's important to note that in this section, you should report all campuses separately. For example, you're currently attending IUPUI, but maybe previously you have attended IU Bloomington or one of the IU regional campuses. Each campus would be entered separately as they are separate institutions. In addition, this is where you will enter any other colleges or universities that you have attended. For each school, it will ask you the dates for which you attended, whether you were pursuing a degree, and if you pursued a degree, whether that degree was awarded or was in progress. your major and minor, and whether the institution was on a semester, quarter, or trimester calendar. Once you have completed this information, you will be able to download the transcript request form. This is a form that you can save as a PDF or print to submit to the institution when you request a transcript. This form has information on your CAS ID, your name, the academic institution from which you are requesting a transcript, and where your transcripts should be mailed. In addition, it contains a unique barcode that allows AADSAS, upon receipt of your transcripts, to match those with your application. It's important to note the difference between requesting transcripts from IU and entering information from IU campuses into the application. IU uses a centralized transcript, which means regardless of which campus you request a transcript from, it will always contain information on any and all IU campuses that you have attended. So if you have an entry in your application for IUPUI and, for example, an entry for IU Bloomington, those will be entered separately. You will, however, only need to order one transcript from IUPUI or IU Bloomington because they will be the same transcript. It doesn't matter which transcript matching form you use because this will have the information to attach it to your application correctly. So, separate entries for IU campuses, one transcript order, one transcript matching form, and it doesn't matter which one you use. It's important to note that other institutions with multiple campuses may require you to order separate transcripts from each institutional campus, and so you should contact the registrar's office from each institution that you plan to order transcripts to find out the exact details. Once you've entered all of the information on colleges and universities and have downloaded your transcript request form, you should move forward with ordering those transcripts as long as your spring grades have posted. So it's important to note that spring grades may not post until approximately May 15th of this year. And if you are having coursework transition from a letter grade to an S or P grade, that may not be completed until late May to early June. It's important to make sure that the transcripts that you order include your spring grades. So this may be an opportunity where you have to wait until those grades are finalized before you order your transcripts. The next section of your transcript is the transcript entry section. And this is where for each institution, you will report all courses on your transcript. It's important that you know that you are required to include courses that you withdrew, repeated, were ungraded, or were test credits or other non-relevant coursework. Within each institution, you'll start by adding a semester. You will then add your academic status at that time and whether the course was completed or is currently in progress or being planned for a future semester. You'll then add information about the course. At this point, this is where you will enter the entire course code. So for example, Introductory Biology, K101, would be entered as BIOL-K101. And that entire component would go into your course code. The name of the course, Concepts in Biology 1, would go in the course title. Next, you would select a subject to classify the course. It's important to know that this classification should be based on course content. For example, human anatomy, the course number is BIOL-N261. Just because the course number indicates it's a biology course does not mean that you should code human anatomy as a biology. It should be coded as anatomy. Similarly, neuroscience coursework, which currently is coded using PSY-B, should not be coded as psychology, but should be coded as neuroscience coursework. You'll enter the number of credit hours, the grade, and then that will be transitioned to a standardized CAS grade. You'll save that information and then repeat for all college coursework. It's important to know that coursework should be assigned to the home institution that you took it, regardless of whether you transferred that credit to IUPUI or another institution. Specific details about entering your transcript entry can be found within the instructions, as well as with this handy video to help instruct you on how to categorize and enter course information. The next section is your standardized tests. And this is where you can enter information about your DAT exam. You will indicate whether you have or have not taken the test, as well as the date in which you have or plan to take it, and you will include your DENT PIN. This will allow your DAT scores upon release to be attached to your application. In addition to DAT scores, you may be required to add individual other standardized tests per your status or the school to which you are applying. That information can be added here as well. The next section is the supporting information section, where you will add information largely outside the realm of your academic pursuits. The first component is the evaluations. This is where you will enter information on individuals who will be writing your letters of recommendation. I want to point out that the option is to either enter 4 individual letters or request 1 committee letter. Committee letters are comprised of an evaluation from a pre-health committee submitted on your behalf. IUPUI does not have a committee letter process, and therefore you will always be supplying individual letters of recommendation. For each letter writer, you will select no. It is not a committee evaluation. You will provide information on your letter writer as well as a deadline. Again, we discussed the fact that you should potentially decide on a deadline on or before the day you plan to submit your application. That way, your application after submission will still have a little bit of time to move through the verification process. So if you have an evaluator who has perhaps forgotten the deadline or is a day or 2 behind, you'll still be fine. You'll then provide a personal message, perhaps a message of thanks, to your letter writer, as well as waiving information and access to the letter itself. Once you hit save, an email will be automatically generated to your letter writer with instructions for how to submit the letter of recommendation on your behalf. It's important to note that if you wait until the due date to enter the information, your letter writers will not have received the email with instructions prior to this time. So this is one of the components of the application that you should complete early. The next section is your experiences section. You may provide information on any number of experiences that you want to include. Experiences are first categorized, and so it's important to note that you should and likely will include experiences that are not specifically relevant to the dental profession. This might include things such as part-time jobs, volunteer work outside of the dental or healthcare community, institutional involvement or leadership, as well as dental relevant things such as shadowing or other work. For each experience, you'll provide information on the organization as well as individual who can verify that the experience occurred, the dates, hours, and type of experience, as well as the 600-character description. This is an opportunity for you to briefly describe the experience, provide information on your crowning achievement or most notable accomplishment, and share information on how this experience has helped transform you into a potential dental school student or dentist. You will then enter all of the experiences that you would like. Once you have completed entering your experiences, you can select up to 6 as your most important to highlight. It's important to note that you are not limited to only entering 6 experiences, but you can only highlight 6. Admissions committees will be able to see all experiences, but we'll look at your 6 most important first. These are the experiences that best reflect your background, mean the most to you, or are most relevant to your application. The next section is achievements, where you will enter information on awards, honors, or scholarships. Again, you will have an opportunity to describe the award, honor, or scholarship, and this is where you should definitely make sure to touch on the merit for which you were selected. The merit by which you were selected, or the reason that this particular award, honor, or scholarship is competitive, is more important in most instances than the dollar amount of a scholarship. Similarly, you can enter as many achievements as you would like. You can select up to 4 that you will highlight as your most important. The next section is where you will focus on licenses, where if you have any relevant licenses that you would like to share with the admissions committee, you can provide information on those. The last section is where you will copy and paste your personal statement. Again, this is 4,500 characters where you are explaining why you want to pursue a career in dentistry. Following completing the rest of your application, which may be done over multiple periods of time and will save automatically so that you can sign out and come back later where you left off. You will then choose to add programs to your application to which you want to apply. You will only be able to see programs that do not have a deadline that has already passed. For this reason, I can see no programs because all deadlines in this cycle have already passed. However, I've previously added the Columbia University College of Dental Medicine to my application as an example. This program materials section is where you would see any and all schools that you have selected, and if you had selected multiple schools, you would be able to toggle between them on this left menu. Each school will have a homepage where they provide information that they have deemed relevant. This usually includes some sort of information about the school or program itself, as well as required information for the application process. You can see here that Columbia University has selected to include their secondary questions within the application itself. This is an option for schools to be able to do to embed their questions within the application. You will not be able to submit the application for this school until you have completed the relevant secondary questions. And if you notice on the home page, this has information on how you can submit the fee for the supplemental application directly to the dental school. Your application will not move forward until the supplemental fee has been accepted by the school itself. Commonly for each school, you will find a page where you are able to connect the coursework that you have taken with the prerequisite courses for that individual school. Had I submitted and finalized my transcript entry section, I would have the ability to match my coursework with the prereqs for this school, indicating what courses I have taken that fulfill this requirement. Once you've completed all of the sections for the schools to which you plan to apply, you can submit your application. You can see here that it will not allow me to submit the application for Columbia University because the deadline has passed. In addition, I have not completed all of the components of the application for Columbia University, including those secondary questions and prerequisite coursework matching. The application will calculate your total fees, and this is based on, again, the number of schools that you are selecting to apply to. At this point, it will allow you to enter credit card information and hit submit once your application is ready. The last section that you'll want to be mindful of is the check status section of your application. This is where you can check on the various components as well as the progress of your application itself. Here I can see any transcripts that I have entered institutions for and that AADSAS is expecting to receive, as well as whether those transcripts have been received and processed by AADSAS. It's your responsibility as the applicant to ensure that transcripts have been ordered, received, and attached to your application. If I had entered information about the evaluators who would be writing my letters of recommendation, I would see a similar section with information on each letter writer. I would also be able to see whether the letter had been received, although I would not be able to view the letter content. Again, it's your responsibility to ensure that your letter writers have submitted the letters to the AADSAS application. Finally, I'm able to track the progress of my application to each school to which I plan to apply. This information shows the application status as updated by the individual school. It also allows me to print or save a PDF of my application. This is ideal if I want to participate in a mock interview so that my interviewer can see all the components of the application that the admissions committee would have access to. Finally, when we go back to the home page, you can see that there is a notification section. This is where AADSAS will communicate important application information to you, such as when the application cycle has closed or when the academic update period has started. Before we end our workshop this afternoon, does anybody have any final questions? Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I will be posting this recording on the Canvas page for the PreP's office. If you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to your pre-professional advisor, whether that's through the PreP's office or the Health and Life Sciences Advising Center. Thank you so much and have a nice afternoon.